Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Debbie Forster. I'm the CEO of the Tech Talent Charter. I know from the sign-up list we have some familiar faces and we have some new faces joining us for our Share and Learn session. So thank you amidst another busy day. I've not had a not busy day yet, but maybe one day. Thank you so much for taking time to join us for this session. We've been talking about the different routes into tech since we first began as the Tech Talent Charter back in 2017. And one of the things that we have heard again and again is people returning to what felt like an old familiar model, but really discovering new things about it. And I'm talking about apprenticeships. So apprenticeships are becoming a route of choice for a number of people to get into tech. But for some companies, we've never had to use it. We're not sure what it does. We're not sure what it doesn't do. We're not really sure about the apprenticeship levy. It's also thinking what we know at the Tech Talent Charter is we get to hear what's working and not working. And one thing that we wanted to share today is the companies who are beginning to think about the apprenticeship levy and apprenticeship programs in a really different way, in an interesting way. So I am delighted to be joined today by Sara Bresler. Sara comes to us from Corndel. Corndel is a signatory of the Tech Talent Charter, and Corndel has been working with one of our great strategic partners, Tech She Can, in relation to thinking about apprenticeships. Karen, let's start it with some information points. If I'm not completely sure what apprenticeships are, what the levy is, what it can and can't do, could you walk me through that first, and then we'll have a conversation?
Yep, sure. I have been very well prepared with a presentation, a brief presentation. I don't want death by PowerPoint, but I think it's really important that everyone joining the call today and obviously watching the recording back can understand what the apprenticeship levy actually is as well, going back to basics and how they can use it innovatively. So if you don't mind, I will start sharing a few quick slides. Okay. Into presentation mode.
This is always that nerve-wracking moment. Will the tech not behave for us? You made it. Go, Sara. Yeah, you got it. We've got a screen. You're in.
Excellent. Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you, obviously, for inviting me along today to talk about the apprenticeship levy and how organisations can use those funds to deliver the learning to their employees and to deliver on strategic objectives and sort of think innovatively around how we do that. I'm going to start off then with some information on the levy, but I wanted to initially dispel a few myths, and one of the myths I know was a myth, something that I believed when I started at Corndel, and I'm sure there will be people listening to the call today who think exactly the same as myself. They'll be joining the call thinking that when they think of the word apprenticeship or apprentices, they're thinking early careers, they're thinking new hires, they're thinking fresh talent, and absolutely it's a great way to bring fresh talent into your organisation, undoubtedly. However, there are lots of other things you can do with it. And when the levy was brought in 2017, it created funding, I suppose, for apprenticeships, but also gave the employers control over how they spend that funding and actually allowed them to provide their staff with a range of training opportunities, really for all levels within the organisation. So apprenticeships, just to let everybody know, are actually available for people of all ages. So not just entry level or early careers. They are open to anyone over the age of 16 at any stage of their career. So it could be a graduate or an apprentice coming in at the early stage of their career, but it could be a senior manager and a director. And apprenticeships are available in what we call levels 2 up to level 7. Now that might not mean anything to people who haven't previously been involved in apprenticeships, but what that means in traditional academic terms is GCSE level right the way up to masters. So you can see how you really can use that levy funding, not just for the hiring of the entry-level talent, but upskilling your existing employees. And in doing that, it does allow you the opportunity to think more creatively about the skills gaps within your organisation and how you're going to use that funding to best deliver positive outcomes for the organisation. So we actually partner with a lot of organisations optimising their levy in this way, lifelong skills investment. And I think think the average age when I last looked of a Corndel apprentice is actually 36 years old. So it really does dispel that myth that it's for entry level or early careers talent. So what is the apprenticeship levy? Might well be people on here that don't really know. Certainly they wouldn't have tuned in if they weren't curious. So the apprenticeship reforms happened, as I said, in 2017. The government introduced a levy tax, essentially a tax that all UK employers with a wage bill above £3 million would be paying into. So once they have reached 3 million as an organisation, 0.5% of that wage bill is paid into a pot. That money can be spent on upskilling, reskilling and hiring apprentices. But the funds remain in that account for 2 years, and it can be spent on apprenticeships within that 2-year cycle. After 2 years, it actually drops off on a rolling cycle. So anything paid in August 2020, for example, would have expired in August 2022. So that the funds remain there and can be spent, as I say, on any level of apprenticeship within that time period. Thinking about the fact that it's for large employers, £3 million plus, another misconception is that the apprenticeship levy is just for large corporates with those huge wage bills. Obviously, the TTC signatories are a broad range of organisations, and the small to medium-sized organisations that we speak with often feel that it's not relevant to them, they've not looked into it, they're not paying into it, or if they are paying into it, they're not paying enough, they don't believe, to even cover the cost of one program, let alone how they can do something strategically to drive change within the business. But I really wanted to challenge that as well, because for businesses who don't meet the levy requirements, the apprenticeship training programs can still be funded and topped up by the government. There's something called an initiative called, co-investment, and it means that the employer only ever has to pay 5% of the cost of the program, and the government funds remains covering the additional 95%. So I think there's something with reserved funds. If you're not a levy payer at all, you are able to access that 95%, but there is a cap on the number of learners. Yeah, it just shows that it is available to all, and there's huge levy available because there's so much unspent. A lot of organisations, if you're out there listening to this and uncertain how to access it, you're not alone. There's a lot of funds left unspent. So I wanted to go a little bit about the benefits of apprenticeships as well. Lots of stats there really, but some of the ones I wanted to pick up on is how it can be seen as a mechanism to close the digital skills gap, how it can help in staff retention, things like that. And certainly one of the things I wanted to pick up on is that 94% of employees would stay at an organisation if they were offered training. So with the levy funds available, why aren't we offering it? And that's quite disturbing. The other fact, just to finish there, 93%, this is a recent report with Randstad, 93% of employers would offer professional coaching to all of their employees. So real parity of opportunity if the money or the resources weren't a consideration. So they're feeling that they don't have the funds or the resources available to offer that coaching across the organisation. So hopefully it's music to their ears that Corndel's apprenticeship development training, there are other apprenticeship providers out there that can offer training to their employees, and certainly the way in which we deliver our program, all of our programs are underpinned by coaching through professional development experts offering that one-to-one sort of support on their journey. So it's a real shame then that we've still got £3 billion, as I say, left untouched. I get calls all the time from clients looking to, I suppose, understand how they can access it. They may have been paying into the levy since 2017, but they've just not accessed those funds. They don't know how to. And good example, I won't mention any names, but only very recently, I've been speaking with a large investment bank who have been paying in, global investment bank, that they're huge, and haven't spent a penny of their levy. So it's a real shame. just a little bit here about some of the programs that we offer. I'm not going to go into detail on those, but I did want to share that there are 600 apprenticeship standards approved for delivery, 1,600 providers or employer providers, and I wanted to sort of set the scene around the landscape there, because with that much variety, you really can train your staff on pretty much anything, and you don't need to see the levy as that tax. It really is I suppose a way of increasing your L&D budget, and obviously a way of delivering on those strategic objectives. I'm happy to delve a little bit more detail in how co-investment works potentially during questions if you'd like, because I think that's a really important way of you understanding that when you've got a huge investment in your staff, you actually will only ever pay a few £100 at worst for these programs. So that's really worth bearing in mind. Finally, moving on to a slide really on diversity. I didn't think I could put a sort of a pitch together or share some slides without talking about diversity. This is Tech Talent Charter after all. EDI, we know, is a huge focus for all organisations. Various reasons why a company might want to focus on diversity. We all know it improves innovation, diversity of thought, increased revenue, productivity, customer retention. All of those benefits are really so clear. But also, it's not just about offering equity of access of opportunities for apprenticeships, but also the equity of progression. And I know from speaking to Debbie in the past, this is really clear as an area of challenge for Tech Talent Charter and the signatories in offering individuals the opportunity to progress. Certainly within the tech space, that diversity doesn't tend to match throughout the organisations, and trying to get more females, as you talked about, working with Tech She Can to get more women in senior roles within technology. And certainly in a fully inclusive organisation, employers need to ensure that all employees are given investment, equity, and that personal development is really offered to everybody, and the apprenticeships can be a cost-effective way to offer that parity of opportunity, really. I'm not going to go into too much more detail here, and I'll share these slides afterwards. I'm sure Debbie's got lots of questions, but essentially we work with organisations to optimise the levy on a variety of strategic objectives, and that could be building data-led culture, building a diverse workforce, encouraging diversity at senior level, creating confident, resilient line managers, supporting accidental managers potentially because they've been promoted within their field because they're an expert, not necessarily having the leadership skills. So hopefully that's given you a bit of background on apprenticeships, the landscape, and really how you can think about using it or accessing it if you haven't been spending it already, to really do something different within your organisation.
Super. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah, we're going to remove the screen so we've got some human faces. And thank you. What's great is some of you have already started sharing some questions with us. If you have had questions that have already cropped up during the presentation, please just go ahead and message those through. Karen is magically putting those across to me so I can feed them into the discussion. But as we're talking, if things come up, do throw those in. We'll build them into our conversation. So this is great. All right. So I've got the framework. If I'm listening to this recording or in the room, please be reassured. We're going to talk both what this means if you're in a really big company, but we're also going to talk about what this means for smaller companies, whatever the journey you're on. And I really want to dig into, Sarah, because for us, the really innovative piece and the real breakthrough is happening with companies that are looking beyond entry level. So again, we'll dig into that. So if that's the bit where if you're listening, you lean forward, don't worry, we're going to cover that in depth. So if we think about apprenticeships, I've read your slides, I've gone through it, I'm ready, but I've got to make that internal case. All right. So if I'm going in internally, help me understand how I'm winning my C-suite, my managers to this idea of what am I putting into it, but what do I get out? Why would I want to do this if I'm a tech employer today?
Okay, for various reasons. Obviously, the stats show around the staff retention. We all know that it's difficult to hire tech talent. So there are ways in which you can access to funds and bring individuals into boot camps and create fresh talent. It's exactly what we do, or what we did actually with Tech She Can on a Zoopla cohort a couple of years ago now. Actually, time is whizzing by, but they wanted to get more women into their tech team, and we, working with Tech She Can, we looked at the advertisements, looked at the job descriptions, used the correct language that you would do, ways in which you can analyze the language that you're using in job descriptions to work out whether it's actually going to be more attractive to a male applicant or a female applicant, for example. So we did a lot around that, and we advertised it as being linked with Tech She Can. Obviously, Tech She Can, if you think about it, it's naturally more attractive to women, but we didn't have it as being completely exclusive. It was open as a program, an entry-level career shifting program to all, but we were really successful in getting 70% female cohort. So if you think about how difficult it is to source female talent into tech, you can, if you think about it differently, look at ways to bring that fresh talent in. So okay. That's more at the early career stage, though.
So if I'm thinking about it, this is in and of itself a new way of thinking about it, to look at apprenticeship schemes as a way of attracting people in at different parts of the pipeline. It's a great way of keeping people. And I think the other thing that's very interesting, and what we've seen you do with Tech She Can and other companies, is that reskilling, cross-skilling, bringing people in. And I think that's a powerful way forward. So this becomes a recruitment, this becomes a retention, and more importantly, that cross-training. Because I think if I'm an employer, I may have people who might be looking for a way out the door, or who I know don't have the skills that I want. So this becomes a powerful way of taking great people who understand my brand, understand my clients, but don't have those tech skills to bring it together. So if I'm saying, because you talked about this as a route into doing that, and for those transition pieces, if I'm trying to grow, if I'm trying to retrain, cross-train in, what is an apprenticeship offer that a different L&D route doesn't? Why would I go for that?
Okay, that's a really good question, because I think it goes back to what actually is an apprenticeship. And an apprenticeship, to be an apprenticeship, has to be a minimum of 12-month program. And you have to prove that you are learning new knowledge, skills, and behaviours. So fundamentally, what it does is allow you to embed the knowledge that you're learning and apply it to the role. Through Corndel, and obviously there are other providers out there, you have individual trainers supporting you on that journey. The way Corndel works, which is slightly different to a lot of organisations, but all of them have some level of support. We scaffold very, very safely, and we offer that one-to-one coaching, and it is an award-winning model. It doesn't really exist in many other providers. That one-to-one coach who delivers the technical training, but provides a mentor to you for the duration of the program. And if you think how expensive, as I say, it is to have executive level coaching, and going back to that, 93% that want coaching or would offer it if it was available, and funds wouldn't be an issue. What you can get through the Levy is an external expert who is supporting your learner on being better at their job, learning new content, whether it's technical content or not. They are learning how to be better at their job. It could be how to be a better leader, because, as we say, they've been promoted because they're good in their craft, they're good software developers. They are not expert leaders. They've just been promoted because they're very good at what they do. So they need the support to be the best they can be, and actually having somebody external who has done that role themselves in industry, which is how we deliver it. They are delivering not just the technical training, but actually they've got those fortnightly or monthly coaching sessions to talk about and address the challenges that they've got and apply what they've learned to a real example. I mean, for example, you would have, it might be the first time an individual has delivered a one-to-one personal development plan. They might be doing an appraisal for the first time. So we might move the modules around to kind of bring that module forward to allow them to gain the learning and the confidence and the knowledge to go into that meeting with a clearer idea of how to deliver bad news, how to sort of manage those conversations, etc. And everything that they're doing, they're applying that, but they then need to report that back as an apprenticeship. So they're answering questions. It really, really does embed it. And I think the difference between an apprenticeship is that on-the-job piece. You know, other learning and development initiatives, they all have their place. Don't get me wrong, they all have their place. And we love, you know, the whole kind of multi-access, you know, available to everybody, online, on demand. That's great. But it does mean that it's not necessarily tailored to the individual, and what we can offer is that tailoring approach.
So let me see if I'm grabbing this for everyone. When we're talking about apprenticeships, if I come at this with an open mind, what I have is the opportunity to access for my team highly bespoke, very wide-ranging training, you know, for about every bit of the disciplines, and we're talking all the way up to master's degree if we're thinking in all AT terms. So I could be putting some of my team through really quite bespoke training that has strong framework, all right, that it's already planned out. Of course, they're having them do evening classes for a master's degree, really, really grounded in my company, in my company's experiences. And as well as being highly bespoke for that person and flexible within the course, there is that coaching and mentoring that helps them. So it is sort of the best of all three worlds if we work on that. So absolutely. If I'm doing that, so let's say I'm sold, my C-team C-suite is sold, we want to start working on that. And we'll come to the funding piece in a minute. What are the things I must do, I mustn't do? What are the questions I need to be asking myself to set this program up for success? So let's keep the focus on, we're talking mid-level, mid to senior level. Yeah. We've got other materials at the Tech Talent Charter that you can look at in the open playbook on apprenticeship and entry level. Let's focus on this innovative piece. What must I do? What mustn't I do if I'm setting this program up for success?
I think there are a number of things. I think the first thing that we work with all of our clients to understand is what the program, what the objectives of the program are going to be. And certainly working with us, we would want to map the content, possibly design the content with you if it's a large enough scale to really deliver the outcomes. Very important that you get a sponsor to do it, C-suite sponsor. It's the same with you know, most change initiatives. You know, most initiatives really need that executive level buy-in. That's really, really important. And actually, when you're launching a program, you know, you've got 50 learners, 10 learners, 100 learners on a program. Whatever the plan for that program needs to be, when you launch it, it's a brilliant opportunity to really market it and set those learners up for success by promoting it internally. One of the things we did with a retailer last year actually was to focus on well, they called them ethnic minority, so women from an ethnic minority background, and we delivered a level 5 leadership and management program for them to be given the confidence and skills to apply for more senior level roles. They recognized that there was a gap at senior level. One of the really important things that was absolutely essential was getting that senior sponsor to be bought in and to make them feel that they're being invested in. And so that launch day, getting everybody on board, not only set the individual learners up for success, but it also helped the organization to promote their commitment to inclusivity and diversity. You know, it's a great message to sell, but I think yeah, definitely senior sponsorship. It's really, really important. You have to, as an apprenticeship, give them the time to invest in the program. I mean, legally it's compliant, and used to be 20%. It's now just changed to 6 hours of the week. Now, the way that most programs are delivered, certainly the way that Corndel delivers, is a blended model. Exactly that. You know, some of it's online learning, some of it's a one-to-one coaching session, some might be a workshop. But that probably only equates to 20% of the 20% or the 6 hours. The rest of it is absolutely applying it to the role. But there is that sort of thinking that my team's really busy, they don't have time, they don't have capacity. You will never gain increased efficiency, improved delivery. You won't gain all of that stuff if you don't take the time or give them the time to innovate and develop their personal skills. So time commitment's really, really important, and investing in them and seeing the bigger picture. It might be short-term pain for long-term gain, but also that sponsorship, I think, are probably the two key things that I would say are a recipe for success.
And I like that what you're talking about. This is thinking about the full parameter of the piece. So there's, from what I was hearing you talk about, we're looking at, yes, it is C-suite sponsorship, but it's also getting that buy-in then down at manager level and team level to understand this has to be embedded within the company. So those around the program understand and support the team and see how this is a win. I think what was interesting as well is getting really concrete ideas of what's the end result, what's the job description we're thinking about, what's the role we're creating, and making sure then that is really appropriately phrased, structured, communicated within the organization to get that
absolutely
piece. So that attraction piece, very, very powerful. But it's also, one of the things you and I've talked about before, it's thinking about not just how do we do the course, create the protected time, the people around it, but then think about what happens after. What happens the day after the apprenticeship? Talk to me about that wider piece, the accidental leadership and management that needs to happen there, and then the what next that sets us up for success.
So I think it is lifelong learning, and it's thinking about how apprenticeships can work with your L&D department to be career development, personal development. I'm talking, not to mention companies again, but I'm talking with another client at the moment where they've been really linked with Text You Can actually, but they're really successful in identifying staff within their organization. They're lucky to have almost an exhaustive pool of candidates that are wanting to move within the business. I don't want to give too much information, but it's an award-winning program. It's fantastic, and it's a real career shift opportunity. But we're talking with them now around what do we do with them after that? Because it's not just bringing them in and getting the talent. We want to retain them. We want to progress them. We want to give them career opportunity, because attracting talent is one thing, but retaining them and allowing them that career development. So looking at apprenticeships as a way to as we say, the accidental manager, it might be that they're coming in, they're given technical skills to do the job. How do we then progress them to the next level? How do we build a more diverse senior leadership team? And so it is just mapping the career development almost aligned to the various standards available. And with 600 available, there are so many things you can look at to map your skill, to look at your employee workforce, look at the gaps in the workforce, and work out what they need for the next steps, and that coaching and the support that helps them on that journey. I mean, you could literally be on a Corndel program from the day you enter your career right the way up to the day you leave the organization in retirement. And it could grow you with that mentor and that coach externally.
But there's a bigger leap I think some companies are making, and we need all companies to understand, is, as one of our panelists said at a different event, companies are waking up to realize they're not just consumers of skills. They have to be creators, and they have to enter in that journey, that lifelong learning piece. And apprenticeships can be an incredibly valuable tool in the toolkit for that. But it is that shift, isn't it, to start thinking about very intentional opportunities to retain and grow people, because we'll be looking at that more and more over the next 12 months at the Tech Talent Charter, because when we're looking at underrepresentation, whether it's women, ethnic minorities, etc., the issue in underrepresentation is not just entry level. If we're not retaining and growing people, and we hear this, we did some research with We Are the City and Maury. women were staying in companies
Yeah.
that had great managers, great culture, but they had those clear career progressions. And apprenticeships are one such opportunity that we can look at.
Yeah.
So let me I'm going to step back to think about, because there's both good news and bad news in the audience if you tell me the plethora of things. So I want to think for a moment or two about what are the questions I ask when I'm choosing between programs and providers. But then I want to come back to, because if I'm a smaller company, I'm probably feeling grumpy by now because I'm not going to have 600 learners. I'm not going to do that. So we're going to bring that down to the small range. But talk to me for a minute. So if I am small or large company, I've got the buy-in, I've got my structure, I know what I want to do. What are the questions I need to be asking and looking for? Because you and I both know it's horses for courses. Certain providers mesh beautifully with some employers, and others not so much. What are the kind of questions I should be asking myself and my provider in order to get that right match?
I think it's really important that you are clear on what you want to get out of it. With, as I said, 1,600 providers, there's a lot to navigate. Obviously, you can do research, and as we all do, we enter into any service nowadays, we do research and look for reviews, etc. But I think you can spend your levy and you can get an apprentice, or you can upskill somebody. If you choose the wrong provider that doesn't work for you in your business, it potentially could have more damage. And you've got to be very, very careful to make sure that, like anything, when you're entering into any relationship, it's going to be mutually so beneficial. It's going to feel right, the fit's going to be right, and it's going to offer the outcomes that you're looking for. So with 1,600, I'm not saying that there are 1,600 fantastic providers. There's 1,600 providers. That's one thing, and so it is navigating and working that out. But I think for me, it's trying to find out how the program is delivered. So what's the model? What's the approach? And I think blended learning is absolutely the way forward. I think that you need to have some flexibility around it. Where we've seen it not work is with other providers. We know our clients have spoken to us about other providers that they work with, and potentially they're quite rigid in the way in which they deliver the program. And they say, we need all of our learners to be available on, the last Friday of every month or every other Wednesday for training. And I think that might work for you if you're in an organization that is very shift based and actually very clear on clocking in and clocking out, then that could really work well. But if you're an organization where there's more autonomy in what you're doing in your role, and it's more sort of self-reliant, then potentially an organization like Corndel or others that are more flexible in their delivery model would work better. So it's working out what your organization needs and make for the learners to be set up for success. That's really important. But I think choosing the right provider for you, the right program, but also that the delivery model, I think, is really, really important. Super. Because they've got to have a positive experience, or it will, as I say, it could do more damage.
Okay, right. So let's take a moment to think. I'm a smaller organization. What should I learn? What can I do? I mean, is it even possible for me as a small organization to take part in the levy? Where are you seeing great practice? What are great smaller companies do to make the most of the levy?
So there's a number of different ways. And as I say, we speak to a lot of organisations who don't realise that the levy is even available to them. And this large financial services company, who absolutely know they've been paying millions of pounds, still don't access it. So if you're a small company, don't be scared, don't feel that you're missing out. There's a lot of big ones out there that haven't taken the steps or taken the leap either. But I think as a small company, you are entitled to 95% government funding, but you might have been paying in a little bit. You might have, and that's something worth mentioning actually, is the cost of the programs can vary quite considerably. So for example, a level 3 leadership and management, 4,500. A level 7, which is your master's equivalent, is 14,000. That sounds like quite a lot of money, but when you break it down, even if you are not a levy payer, you would only ever pay £700 for the level 7 leadership program.
And £700 to get the effective in an MBA for one of my team is worth looking at. Yeah.
It's, our program is Imperial College, delivered in partnership with Imperial College. They get an Imperial College certification. They've got 12 months fortnightly executive coaching from experts in their field for £700 to build your strategic leadership team. It really can have an impact. And so I think even the smaller organizations, I actually sometimes when I speak with them, it's more exciting because they just didn't feel that this was ever an opportunity for them.
It's and that's fantastic for retention.
Yeah,
to say to somebody at an SME I can make sure that you're getting master's level education. That's a great retention tool.
Brilliant
retention. And there's something I will drop in conversation here. If you're listening to this and you've been part of the Tech Talent Charter, you will probably heard of one of our partner organizations, Tech She Can. Now, Tech She Can similarly is looking at this early inspiration piece and this transition piece. They've been working with providers like you at Corndel. And something to put out to people. I mean, big companies, yes. So it's a great way of joining. But I'd also say to the SMEs, one of the things I love that Tech She Can is starting to look at is to think about how they can work with their members to make sure there is zero wastage of the apprenticeship levy.
The levy gifting as well is
this
another
levy gifting. So if you're sitting and listening to this thinking, yeah, but even £700, how am I ever going to get that? Think about joining Tech She Can. So Tech She Can is a great way for companies to understand how they can reach into schools for early inspiration, but they're also starting to do some real groundbreaking work with a range of providers, a range of companies, and to think about this really creative and innovative use of the levy, both within big companies, but this gifting piece and really their target that they'll be publishing. Look at their recent research. Their work to aim for zero wastage of the levy is powerful for companies of all sizes, for not-for-profits, etc. So if you're sitting in this and thinking, well, we could never afford. Yes, you can. It is worth reaching out to Tech She Can and making a difference in that respect.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else I need to think of as an SME? So the art of the possible and the money, we've sort of sorted that piece. Is there anything else that I need to think about if I were going to embrace on a much smaller scale on an apprenticeship within my organization?
I suppose it is just, what do you want it to achieve? I think on a smaller scale, it is selecting the right provider. Unfortunately, Corndel, generally does work with larger organisations at scale to deliver that sort of change piece. We sometimes work on what we call connected cohorts, where we might have, and that might be something that we could look to pursue. I hadn't spoken to Tech Talent Charter about that, but potentially looking to connect with other like-minded organizations so they can go on that journey together, because going on a connected cohort of some kind, or a closed cohort as we do with our larger organizations, allows the learners to go on the journey together. And I think that can really add value to the individual learner. If they're one learner from one organization going on that themselves, that's fine. But it's, we all like to work, we're social animals, aren't we? And we all like to be with other people. And I think learning from other organizations, what they're doing, how they're, that whole kind of cross-pollination internally, if you did a cohort, but equally that sort of cross collaboration, that sort of exposure to way other organizations are doing it, really helps to give a different perspective. So I think potentially look for organizations, providers who will put you onto that kind of approach. I would imagine that would give the best learner experience.
Super. So think in terms of collaboration, think about what you can learn from others. Look at programs like Tech She Can to see how we can join in those sorts of things. All right. So we've had some questions coming in. I want to shift into some of our questions. So one of the first ones that I would like to say is, how do I tell me more about this co-investment? What does that mean? How do I start actioning that?
So co-investment, as I say, if you are already a levy payer, you will have been paying funds into, levy tax every month. You will have someone within your organization at some point, as we all do, has been sent a login to a digital apprenticeship service account. Like me, if you're anything like me, you'll have been sent a login. It'll be lost somewhere in the ether because it won't have been on the top register. So the first thing you would need to do is to contact the apprenticeship, government apprenticeship standard, and get the login details. You'll then be able to log in, see what your funds are. Apprenticeship providers, certainly Corndel, would talk you through that process and show you how to do that and who to contact if you are literally a blank piece of paper and I don't know where to start. Then approach either your Corndel or other providers will be able to give you advice. You then would set up what we call a cohort. Now it could be a cohort of one, but you would set up an account, you'd set up a cohort which is linked to your selected provider, and that provider then starts drawing down funds. How it works is if you've got I don't know, £100,000 in your pot and you're about to sign up 10 people on a £14,000 level 7 program, then of course the amount you've got is not going to cover that. The apprenticeship provider draws funding on monthly basis from your account. You don't get involved in it. You give us access, or the provider access, to draw that down. Once it reaches the limit, it goes into co-investment. What happens then is we continue to draw down, but the government is paying in, and we would then contact you for that 5%. So it is actually quite straightforward, and I think it feels a little bit scary, but the right provider will help you navigate that.
Super. All right, well, let me jump into, I've got someone who's giving me a really practical question. How have you seen people manage the time out that an apprentice needs? What's the best practice you've seen? Are there any problems to avoid?
Again, it depends on the cohort and the population and what their roles are. And as I said before, if they are, the challenges we've often seen have been within retail, where they're on a shop floor, or it's been within a warehouse, and they don't have access to computers to log in and do self-study. So that can be a real challenge. So it is for those organisations and for that population, we would actually recommend a much more structured approach, where it is Wednesday afternoon, they are blocked out. Maybe half of the cohort goes on a Wednesday. You don't want everybody off the shop floor obviously at the same time, so that's quite important, sort of balancing it. The other thing to consider is whether or not, outside of that, if it's an organization where it's almost autonomous, still try wherever possible to block that time out, protect
Good.
that
I would
time.
agree.
I think it's really important. We go through, we obviously preaching to ourselves, we do apprenticeships internally, and we really do have to block that time out, and we say, no, that's our focus time, and we know, and you have to communicate that is protected time, and it sometimes is only 2 or 3 hours a week, but it's important to protect it.
And that's why it's important to get those middle managers on board, the team on board, so they're understanding the value of what's doing. Because that, if it's not protected, it's taken. And if it's taken, you're robbing yourself of the value that goes on.
You're robbing yourself of the value, and that they will drop out. If it starts to impact and add to your workload, and you're doing it out of hours, it's no longer an apprenticeship, and it becomes additional workload. And certainly during the pandemic especially, we've seen a lot of people going on breaks in learning for that, because they just haven't been able to cope. And I think the pressure and the increased workload, I don't know, everyone seems, you said it right at the beginning, everyone seems so busy. We don't have.
So it's about being really intentional and being brave to hold and retain those times.
Absolutely.
Mindful of time, let's end on some good news. When you've been looking at post-apprenticeships, the sort of candidates that are coming out, what are the things that you're seeing that will help us in terms of selling it internally and to get the right people on these courses?
I think the way Corndel would work is absolutely identifying that return on investment. It's really, really important that we work with our clients to understand, we said at the outset, what the outcomes need to be, and then assessing that and really, I suppose, being able to review continually throughout the programme, but very much at the end looking to see whether it's delivered on the impact. And I think some of the really positives that we've had, I don't have the stats to hand, but something like 48% of on our leadership and management specifically, 48% felt confident to apply for promotion. I think 60% or something. I'll have to get these figures. I feel bad that I'm not sharing specific stats with you, but definitely way above 50% felt more confident in their role. And I think just feeling confident, feeling that they are set up for success has a really positive impact on the organisation. And I know that as part of the apprenticeship programme, and you have to do, obviously, that the endpoint assessment, there is an assessment as part of it, and certainly for the level 5 as an example, they have to put a business proposal together, they have to pitch a project plan, and they have to think about a challenge within the organisation. And 27% of about 1,000 learners that we've put through, there's quite a lot of projects that have actually been taken up and implemented into the organisation as a process improvement. So you are giving your learners the time to think about the organisation, think about the challenges, think about their role and other people's roles within the company, and you're giving them the time to think differently and to have the skills to approach it differently. So whether it's diversity of thought or whether it's just innovation time, time to take a step back, and we hear about all the tech giants giving Innovation Fridays, it's the same thing with an apprenticeship. You're giving them the time to stop thinking about their to-do list and what they've got to do today, but actually time to reflect on what they do, how they approach it, the working practices for both themselves and the organisation, and that really does have great value in driving the business.
Sara, thank you. Listen, and if we think about what we know from the Tech Talent Charter, from our report, one of the biggest problems that we hear reported again and again is that pipeline, particularly for underrepresented groups, that retaining, growing, getting that pipeline for senior people within tech, for women and other underrepresented groups. What we're talking about within apprenticeships is a great framework, a structure, well-trod, funded, supported by coaching and mentoring on the outside, that leaves us with people who have more confidence, more skills, have brought their skills and this learning to bear to help us solve real business problems. It feels almost like a no-brainer. So, this is part of the start of a discussion. And if you are new to this discussion, please have a look in our open playbook. Please have a look as well as on this talk. We have other talks to share. We're also continuing to do research. We know these alternate routes into tech, which we want to change that wording for 22, 23. Is that this is a route into tech, whether we're talking boot camps, whether we're talking apprenticeships, cross-training, upskilling. This is a powerful way for you to fill those gaps in your talent pipeline and to ensure that you're getting more diversity into your team. So lots to learn. Have a look at our information note, come to our open playbook, come to other sessions like this. Sara, thank you so much from Corndel for being here. Really appreciate it. Love the work you're doing with Tech She Can. Everyone keep a lookout for that zero wastage pledge. There's a lot that you can tap into there. I hope you join us again for another of our sessions. Thank you, Sara. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining. Thanks, Debbie.